can I just say one thing firstly? I love the name Eat Sleep Boxing Repeat.
Welcome back to ESBR Boxing's YouTube channel. Delighted as always to be joined by Danny. We're here to discuss what is next for Conor Benn after his big win against Chris Eubank Jr. in their rematch on Saturday night. Very dominant performance, wasn't it, Danny? Very, yeah. Well, Eubank arguably didn't win a round, and we're here to discuss what might be next for Conor Benn. Hopefully, lots of big fights. Where to start, Danny? I'll start off with. Do you think Conor Benn will definitely move back down to 147? Do you have concerns about his ability to do that? He's not fought at 117 for a long time now. His last two fights obviously been kind of, what was it, 156 pounds and 159 pounds, so over the light middleweight limit. But yeah, your thoughts on Conor Benn returning to 147, please.
I think he's made it very clear that he wants to return to welterweight, and he in particular wants to win the WBC welterweight world titles. So I think him and his team will make every effort to get back down there. I'm no expert in nutrition and weight making and stuff like that, but I imagine it will be pretty difficult. Like, he didn't look that much smaller than Chris Eubank Jr. on Saturday night. He looked really wide, looked a lot bigger than the first fight. I thought, if you're inclined to believe what the post rehydration clause figures, he would have came in, at well above middleweight. He would have had to probably cut down to get the middleweight. So he's probably got about a stone and a half to shift if he's going to get down to welterweight. That's obviously including some water weight on fight week. I would like to see him return to welterweight. I think that's where he'll have most joy. I think that's where he'll be his most effective, and it's definitely where the easiest route to a world title is for him, particularly when you look at the 154 division, and he's very small to be fighting at middleweight. But I do think it'll be difficult for him to get back down to welterweight.
Yeah, no, I do agree with you. April 2022 was the last time he actually fought at welterweight against Chris Van Heerden over 3.5 years ago. So we'll see. I know that's what he wants to do, but it wouldn't surprise me if they maybe try and do that and change their minds. And they fight at 154 instead. However, I just think the difference between 154 and 147 is the quality of the champions. Basically, at 154, Murtaza Aliyev, Sebastian Fundora, obviously Virgil Ortiz, Jaron Ennis aren't full world champions yet, but they're two of the biggest names in the division. Even Abbas Baru, I think, looks like a very good fighter to me. Whereas at 147, not quite the same. Rolly Romero, Mario Barrios as well. But to give respect, there's still some good fights at 147 as well. Obviously, we're recording this before Brian Norman Jr. and Devin Haney fight this weekend. Do you think Mario Barrios is the most likely fight for Conor Benn, Danny? And do you see it happening next?
That seems to be the name he wants, whether that's because as he says, he's always wanted to win the WBC world title like his father, or if he views Mario Barrios as a soft touch, which is a narrative that's gained a lot of traction over the last year. I think it was highlighted when he fought Manny Pacquiao, but he does have some good wins, of course, being Ordenis Ugas. He's not a bum, you know what I mean? You don't get in the position he's in without having some ability, but that seems to be the route that Team Benn want to go down. You'd imagine the easiest fight to make is the all matchroom clash with Lewis Crocker. There was no real mention of him after the win over Eubank Jr. from Conor Benn or Eddie Hearn even, and I just wonder if they view it as, if you lose to Crocker, you can't really go in to another big fight after, whereas Crocker's the one that you can sort of fall back to if you lose against a bigger name for more money. So maybe that's the thinking there, but Barrios definitely seems to be the route they want to go down.
Yeah, for sure. I think with Crocker, maybe if you asked Eddie Hearn or Frank Smith now, they might see Crocker as a unification fight. Maybe I think Crocker's obviously the stock's gone up in this last fight, hasn't it, against Paddy Donovan? So maybe we'll see. What about against Rolly Romero, Danny? Romero, I don't know about you, but had that big win over Ryan Garcia back in May. You're more in the know than I am, but I've not really heard too much from him since then. I know he was in London for some reason a little while back, but do you think there's a possibility in that fight happening?
That has all gone very quiet on the Rolly Romero front. There was talk, I think I saw at one point, of him fighting Pacquiao. He's always been someone who, for whatever shortcomings people see in him as a fighter, he's been able to get big fights. He brings entertainment, I suppose you could call it, outside the ring, but boxed very well against Ryan Garcia, of course, and him versus Conor Benn would be a fight that I'm sure would have plenty of entertaining moments in the build up. I would make Conor Benn probably a favourite over Rolly Romero, but that's not one that you see as much. It's not one that the promoters talk about as much. I think Rolly Romero is probably holding out for a mega fight, and though Conor Benn's star power is big over here, it's not the same as fighting, a Manny Pacquiao or even a rematch with Garcia for Romero. You wouldn't have thought.
Yeah, look, it's hopefully I would love to see Conor Benn go back straight into a big fight. We've seen him in big fights. He's now arguably the biggest name in British boxing, who's kind of active. Obviously, got Joshua, who hasn't fought for over a year now. Tyson Fury, who, as things stands, retired. So Conor Benn now, I think now's the time to kind of really push on and be in these big fights. And you got to think with what DAZN have said recently about DAZN Ultimate or whatever it's called, about the amount of pay-per-view fights that are going to happen next year. You got to think he's going to be a big part of that. Moving on to Saturday night, Danny, how much credit do you give Conor Benn? Because I'm sure you've seen Dave Allen's comments in regards to losing to a faded Eubank back in April and then beating a completely washed Eubank now. But look, he still had to go in there and do it. It was still a lot on the line there in regards to kind of pride. But how much credit do you give him over dominating Eubank the way he did on Saturday?
You do have to give him a certain degree of credit. It was a very, very poor version of Chris Eubank Jr. We all know that. I don't think anyone could deny that. But Conor Benn showed discipline and composure to a point that we've not seen in his career thus far. Perhaps even too much. Maybe if he did throw caution to the wind a bit earlier, he could have forced the stoppage. But in saying that, he also could have presented an opportunity for Eubank to land a big punch and get himself back into the fight, and he didn't do that. And showed a good level of boxing IQ and discipline, but it was an extremely depleted version of Chris Eubank Jr. I mean, I talked there about Conor Benn giving him an opportunity to land something to get him into the fight. Could he have thrown something to get him back into the fight? There didn't look to be much on any of his punches. He didn't look to be able to fit for more than 30 seconds, a minute of a round. The rest of it was just purely focused on survival. So, like, you can't take away from the performance Conor Benn put in, but at the same time, you have to, just live in the real world. And he was in there with a completely shot fighter, it looked to me.
Yeah.
He was faded in the first fight, Eubank, and was a lot worse second time around.
Do you think you could even criticize Conor Benn for not stopping him? Because
Yeah, I think you could.
Yeah.
I think you could. I think you could have stopped him. I think it's easy saying that in hindsight, but I think if Conor Benn had have fought more aggressively in the middle round, he could have forced the stoppage. But he wasn't to know, I suppose. But yeah,
I don't like raining on people's parades here, but I just think, looking back at it, I think Eubank was there. I think he was there for the taking. I think he kind of was, and Ben obviously had those two knockdowns right at the end of the fight. And if there had been another 30 seconds left, I think he probably would have stopped Eubank the way things were going.
Yeah.
But you can argue maybe kind of maybe actually should have stopped him a lot earlier. Also, remember Dave Allen saying that Nigel Benn would have stopped Chris Eubank Jr. in one round, and I don't think that's far off, to be honest. Final question from me to you, Danny. Will Conor Benn be a world champion? Something that Chris Eubank Jr. didn't achieve, depending on whether you count the IBO things as a world title, but something that both dads did achieve. But yeah, it means he's got to beat a Mario Barrios or a Lewis Crocker or maybe someone at 154, and we don't know what's going to happen next. Look, Conor Benn, he could have a bit of time at the ring. We might not see him back in the ring for a little bit. These title fights aren't going to be easy to make. If I'm Mario Barrios, I want a lot of money to fight Conor Benn, so we don't know. But do you see it happening?
I think if he gets back down to welterweight, I think he will become a world champion. I think he'll get plenty of opportunities, and that's sort of why I'm thinking that. You've got Devin Haney, you've got Ryan Garcia, but in terms of a UK perspective, he's the only big commercial name at welterweight. Sorry, Jack Catterall. And I think if he fails in his first bit of the world title, I don't think he's someone who's going to have to get too many more wins to get another opportunity. That's just the nature of the business. And with the welterweight division not being at its strongest, I think he will pick up one at 147. I don't think he'll be an undisputed champion, or I don't think he'll ever be the consensus number one welterweight in the world, but I think he will win a world title.
Great. All right, we'll leave it there, Danny. Obviously, it's all still very raw, so we'll see what happens. But yeah, big congrats to Conor Benn on a massive win, and we will see what happens next. Danny, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, mate.